I do think they're actually going to be getting rid of Joe Biden. I don't think he's going to be the nominee in 2024. But I also don't think they want to have an election. I certainly don't think they want to risk someone like RFK Jr. winning. So I think the way they're going to do it is they're going to act like Biden is the guy all the way up through the primaries. When the primaries are over, they're still going to say Biden's the guy, that he defeated handedly RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson, and that Joe Biden is obviously the nominee. And then right before the convention, I think they're going to be moving him aside. And they're going to be actually, in my guess, if I were a betting woman, I would say that they're going to be putting in Gavin Newsom is how they're going to do it. And the way they're going to do this, look, they don't want to have an election. They're not interested in an election, a primary. They just want to put in who they want to put in because they don't want to risk somebody, like I mentioned, RFK Jr., winning that nomination. They don't want to have an actual battle of Democrats. They don't want to have debates with RFK Jr. and Gavin Newsom or whoever else might be Cory Booker or whoever, Kamala, maybe she's, I still want to try, or whoever else they think might be trying to run for president, Pete Buttigieg, whoever it might be. They don't want to actually have those debates. They don't want to actually have a primary. They just want to put in the person they want to put in. And we saw that even with Joe Biden himself getting the nomination the last time around. And we saw when they chose Kamala Harris, they tried to shove her down our throats. They were saying, this is the next president of the United States. We're finally going to have a woman. She's going to be a woman of color, and you're going to like it. And so they were trying to parlay her into the presidency through the vice presidency. But it didn't work because nobody liked Kamala Harris. And when she got into that role, people liked her even less. And less and less. And they saw that she has no leadership skills whatsoever when it comes to leading a country. And her approval ratings have just absolutely tanked. She's less likable than even Joe Biden, if that's even possible. So they need to get rid of both of them. They're not going to be able to just move Biden aside. They're not going to be able to, they're in a pickle because they can't replace Kamala Harris as his running mate. Who would they replace her with? And that looks terrible. To replace after they tout it, they're propping up. We've got the woman of color. There's no way they could replace her. They'd have to find another woman of color, and even then, it'd be very awkward. I mean, maybe they tossed around in their minds, Stacey Abrams, maybe in their minds, but again, not a national figure that people identify with or gravitate to. They've tried. So how are they going to get out of this dilemma that they're in? How are they going to get Joe Biden to move aside, get Kamala Harris to move aside, and get somebody else in? And their only strategy is to not hold a primary, but instead go straight to the convention, have Joe Biden suddenly, he says, okay, there's just too much going on with my family. I need to worry about my son and my family and my life. And so I am not going to run for another term. I'm sorry. You all expected me to. I know. Thank you. Love you. But I'm not going to be seeking a second term. Now, he's not going to step down because then that would mean Kamala Harris steps in, right? And they don't want that. So they're going to want him to ride out his term all the way to the end. But what they're going to want to do come that July convention is they're going to want him, after they give them the anointed one, their next anointed one, they're going to want him to campaign alongside that person, shaking hands, waving, saying, this is, I'm just getting too old. I said I would only do one term. Now I'm really thinking about that and realizing it. So I'm going to keep my promise. And here's the new person. Here's Gavin Newsom. And I want everybody to vote for Gavin Newsom. And he's the guy. He's the one we want. He's the one we love because he's super ultra establishment. And he's clearly the one that they have picked to succeed Joe Biden. And it's their way of getting rid of Kamala Harris. Why? Because you can't have two of them from California, right? So it's going to be awkward. And Gavin Newsom's going to say, well, I'm from California, and so I need to get somebody from the East Coast. It's going to be a big chatter on CNN. You can see it now. Oh, well, they can't go with Kamala Harris. They can't have two people from California. They do need to have representation if they're going to be fair to the East Coast or Midwest representation. And so they're going to need to find a different person to be Gavin Newsom's running mate. And Kamala Harris will say, for the good of the country, I agree that, we really need representation. That's what America's about. And so both of us being from the West Coast and California, it just doesn't make sense. So I'm happy to move on with my life. And this was fun and this was great, but I'm moving on. So she'll get to bow out gracefully somewhat. Joe Biden will get to bow out gracefully. They'll be able to bring Gavin Newsom in without a vote. And this is where it gets important. How can they do that? Well, they don't need to have a vote. All they have to do is show up at the convention and they could say the delegates are voting. And these are, they'll have this kind of pretend thing. So they'll be able to sidestep all the state's primaries. And they'll have the convention. And at the convention, they'll say, oh, gee, Joe Biden's stepping aside. Now it's a scramble and the primaries are over, so we can't have the people vote. So we, the DNC, have come up with a few candidate options, and we're going to let the delegates vote on those few candidate options. And they're going to play around with it and make it seem like it's a real, true Democratic vote, even though the people aren't voting at all. It's just the delegates. And they're going to ensure that, I'm telling you, I think it's Gavin Newsom. That is who they're going to put into that position. I could be somebody else, I suppose. I don't know how in love with him they really are. I think they just want somebody establishment.
Thank you guys so much for watching the Kim Iversen Show throughout 2023. So whether you were here with us from day one when we launched on January 2nd, or whether you joined us somewhere in the middle, we did see a lot of growth this year as a show, and we hope 2024 is even a better year. We hope that more people discover independent media bringing forward different perspectives than the approved establishment narratives, and nowhere better to do that than Free Speech Rumble. So we really appreciate that, and we hope that we see a lot more growth. So we will be back New Year's Day, Monday, January 1st, with a fresh show to kick off the new year. I hope that you have a great weekend. Make the most of what's left of 2023, and we will see you next year. Good night.